There's little sign here of the death and destruction that has ravaged this land. Life goes on. But El Fasher can't escape the crisis.
With me here is Dr. Eltigani, the chairman of the Darfur Regional Authority. It is my pleasure to welcome you, sir.
Thank you very much.
You are in The Hague. Tell me, why are you here?
Well, I am in The Hague in my capacity as the chairman of the Darfur Regional Authority. And as you know, the Darfur Regional Authority was established in 2011 following the signing of the Doha Peace Agreement between the Liberation and Justice Movement, which I am chairing, and the government of Sudan. It is an expanded authority that has 11 ministries and 5 commissions, and it is a vehicle for implementing the Doha Peace Agreement. And as you know, Darfur has been engulfed in war since 2003, and as a result of that war, the service sector has collapsed, as well as the infrastructure. And therefore, we have agreed in that peace agreement to call for a donors conference to support the reconstruction and development program for Darfur. We have started preparations for the donor conference some time ago. The president had established the national committee for the donors conference, and then the national committee has also formed some subcommittees, including the subcommittee on planning and coordination, which was overseeing the implementation of Darfur Joint Assessment Mission, with the full cooperation and support of the donors and development partners. We have finished our preparations, and the conference is supposed to be convened in Doha on the 7th and 8th of April. And therefore, we decided to pay visits to potential donors in order to promote the conference. We have visited before Spain, Italy, as well as we also had some meetings in Brussels at the headquarters of the EU Commission. And then we also paid a visit to some Asian countries, including China, Japan, South Korea, some of the Gulf states, including Kuwait, Sultanate of Oman. And now, during this trip, I'm just coming from Paris, and before that, I was in Berlin, and we are here today to meet the Dutch government in order to brief them on our preparations to...
So if I may cut you there, sir, it appears the war is over, and therefore Sudan is moving forward. Yeah. And now the world is rallying around to give all the assistance they could give to the Darfur government in order to rebuild the nation. Can you say, in your own opinion, that now it is a new phase for Sudan?
Absolutely, there is no doubt about that. Usually, when a war ends with a peace agreement, usually in the developing countries, the national governments are not in a capacity to support massive reconstruction development program. That's why some of the developing countries, and Sudan is no exception, resort to donors to support the reconstruction development program. Therefore, being a region or an area that's emerging from conflict needs support in that front. So that's why we believe that the donors can provide support for the reconstruction development.
You use the word donors. Does that mean that there is no attachment of aid giving and repayment of these support, or in terms of financial support from these government, the Western government, let me put that way?
No, it depends. The donor community usually has a number of ways to support the reconstruction development program. Some of them provide grants, others provide loans, some of them mix both grants and loans. So it more or less would depend on the country and its aid philosophy.
But would that favor Sudan?
Well,
considering what African nations have faced in terms of aid giving and aid receiving from Western government, do you think this is the right time to be looking for the outside world to receive aid that will have some attachment?
Of course, the best option is for any country to be able to provide or to support its own reconstruction and development.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that's not the case in the developing countries. I mean, the way things goes now, it's not only in Sudan, but in and around our country, and across Africa, most of the African countries more or less would need external aid to support their economies. Sudan is no exception. The country has gone through a very difficult financial time, particularly in 2012, simply because the South has had its independence. Previously, we used to depend on exportation of oil. 80% of that oil has gone to the South. And therefore, we more or less became vulnerable. And the UN Assessment Mission has actually estimated that Darfur may probably need in the neighborhood of $7 billion for its reconstruction development program. This is well above the capabilities of the national government. Of course, the national government made a pledge of $2 billion to the reconstruction and development efforts of Darfur. That money should be paid over 6 years. And we have just received the first installment of 800 million Sudanese pounds to that effect.
Thank you very much. And looking at it this way, Africa has this culture of building and destroying. Do you think such things, the war that happened in Sudan, will not repeat again in order to pull the country back again?
Well, I hope it will not repeat itself again, and I hope that the few gaps therein should be patched up. But as you said, it's not something that is limited to Sudan. It is across the country. This is due to underdevelopment, due to the fact that African countries lack resources, due to the fact that in some of the African states, the systems of governance is more or less problematic, and therefore you always find mismanagement of economies of some of the African countries usually represent an entry point to the gradual collapse of the African state. And we do believe that if African countries have to keep in a very good shape, then I think there is a need for these countries to adopt much more transparent systems, as well as more stronger governance systems, which would allow participation of all people. In other words, should be inclusive. And as far as the Sudan is concerned, I think we have the opportunity now to bring the entire nation together. Particularly that nowadays we are addressing this issue of constitution, and I think everybody is more or less concerned, and everybody is more or less would like to participate in the constitutional process, in the drafting of a new constitution to Sudan, simply because the transitional constitution has, that was a constitution that was governing the country over the transitional period when the SPLM was in power. Now that the SPLM has gone with the House, I think we need to reconsider our constitution, to have a new constitution, and that warrants the participation of all political parties.
So definitely I could see that Sudan is doing a lot to move forward, and from what we are hearing from you, the president is not just what most people outside will think he is, that he's doing a lot to rebuild the nation. And that is very impressive, that such initiatives are being put in place for people in Sudan to get all the support they need. Yeah. You want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say Sudan has a great potential. The country is blessed with a lot of resources, foremost its human resources. And I think we have every reason to believe that we have a very good future. And the country, even though it has gone through very difficult times, there was a war in the south, there's a war in Darfur, there's a war in the east, and so forth and so on, this polarization. But I think the fact that the country continues to be intact is also a blessing. We need now to consolidate our unity. We need to consolidate our harmony, and I'm sure that that will be the gateway to the development of Sudan. Particularly that Sudan is now in the heart of Africa. It is It's a country that should hold together the African countries right from the Horn of Africa through to the Atlantic Ocean. And it is stability, its security, sustainability of its security is important to keep the African countries intact also.
I've been talking to the chairman of Darfur Regional Authority, Dr. Eltigani, and you've heard a lot of things from the chairman himself. It has been my pleasure talking to you, Chairman.
Thank you very much.
And we'll be following you as the event progresses. And Aftv will be bringing you more on the peace agreement that will be taking place in Doha on the 7th and the 8th of April. So viewers out there, watch Aftv and continue to follow the event happening in Sudan as Sudan is making progress for peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nigerian General Martin Luther Agwai has a difficult and dangerous assignment.
Good morning. How are you all?
He's the commander of UNAMID, the United Nations African Union mission in Darfur. His job? To keep the peace in one of the world's bloodiest and most protracted conflicts.
I try to remind the whole world that if we believe that there are difficulties, there are challenges, there are things that need to be done in Darfur, then we need to put our money where our mouth is.
Caught in the middle of a war between Sudanese government forces and heavily armed rebel groups, UNAMID is undermanned and outgunned. After 5 years of fighting and as many as 300,000 people dead and 2.5 million displaced, the UN is meant to be bringing an end to this war. But the world's largest peacekeeping mission is bogged down and is unable to fulfill its mandate to keep the peace.
Presently in Darfur, there is no peace to keep. That makes our job more difficult.
In the searing heat of Darfur lies El Fasher, the capital of North Darfur. There's little sign here of the death and destruction that has ravaged this land. Life goes on. But El Fasher can't escape the crisis. On the city fringes, around 150,000 people have crammed into camps seeking refuge from the fighting. Almost 2 million people live in camps like this across Darfur. On the other side of the city, another camp. This is where the UN and the African Union have joined forces for their mission in Darfur. It's 9 a.m. and UNAMID Commander General Agwai convenes his daily security meeting.
And in that area also, it seems that the fights did not stop, especially in the south.
Reports of fighting have the General worried. The recent death of several of his peacekeepers has UNAMID on a high state of alert, one step away from full evacuation.
Why don't you look at the experience of UNMISS?
As commander, each day you keep hoping and keeping your fingers crossed that all the numerous patrols that we send outside all come back with no incident. But not every day you will be lucky.
On the 8th of July, UNAMID suffered its worst day in Darfur. The UN suspects the Arab militia group Janjaweed ambushed a convoy of soldiers and policemen on its way back from a patrol. 7 peacekeepers were killed and 22 injured in a fight that lasted more than 2 hours. With no air support, they were sitting ducks.
If we have attack helicopters, that would have definitely been a super bonus, because we would have been able to shift the fire on them and maybe save more lives.
With no helicopters, UNAMID is unable to counter-attack, and the warring parties know it.
We're now being targeted. We're now being pulled in as part of the conflict. And sadly, a lot of them have to pay the supreme sacrifice of losing their lives.
I want to assure the whole international community that to those who think they can perpetuate this act and discourage us from our mission, I will say they will fail.
The problem for UNAMID is the Janjaweed has support in high places. The UN accuses the Sudanese government of directing the Arab militia. It's an accusation Sudan's presidential advisor on Darfur denies.
First of all, I would say very frankly and very honestly, all what is being said in the Western media is deliberate distortion.
So you can categorically say that your government is not funding any party in the conflict?
Definitely. Why should we do? And the rebellion is against the government. So why should the government support any group against the other? Except in the sense that we have always opened our doors for those who would like to come for peace, for those who would like to negotiate with us.
Only 2 rebel groups have been willing to negotiate with the government and sign the Darfur peace agreement. Many more groups have dug in and refused to negotiate. That's turned Darfur into a diplomatic minefield for General Agwai.
Not all the actors, not all the stakeholders signed the agreement. So it becomes very difficult for you on the ground to try to enforce any peace agreement.
From the air, the enormity of General Agwai's problem is clear. He's been promised a force of 26,000, but so far he has less than 10,000 peacekeepers spread thinly across the hostile Darfur landscape, an area twice the size of Victoria. Peace has proved elusive. What began as an uprising of African tribespeople against the majority Arab government has spread. Rival ethnic groups have been drawn into the conflict as they compete for scarce resources. The UNAMID commander has come to Umbaru in the far west of Darfur to see how some of his troops are faring.
I just want to use this opportunity to thank all of you for all the good work you have been doing in the mission area. Your company commander...
This is home for a company of Senegalese soldiers.
Difficulties that you are facing.
It's oppressively hot and dusty, and their commander wants to make their camp a little more comfortable.
I want everybody should plant 1 tree before you finally leave here. Good.
Boosting morale comes easily to the general.
And who is the champion? Good. Right. Okay, merci.
The distance between
UNAMID's peacekeepers desperately need backup, and the commander and his staff are battling to make it happen.
You spoke about needing tyres and batteries for your 4x4s and the trucks.
Yes.
What are your APCs like?
We have 4 APCs here. 3 are working, not very properly but acceptable, and 1 didn't work, but can move a little bit here around the camp only.
One thing's for sure, new armoured personnel carriers will not be arriving quickly. Equipping UNAMID troops in Darfur is a logistical nightmare.
Yes, the isolation of the area is one of the key problems. It's 2,220 kilometers from the port. You can't get further from the sea. And so it is difficult to move the kit down that route. We've got good roads to the halfway point, and after that it deteriorates into what you and I would recognize as tracks across country. And not all the lorries, the trucks can cope with those roads, and it's taking a lot longer for us than we had anticipated in these conditions.
The major thing that most people still don't come to terms with is that the troops that were initially deployed here were deployed to observe and report the implementation of the Darfur peace agreement. It became easier to deploy this way, lightly equipped, and to be able to move around, believing that there is a peace to keep. But things have turned out to be different. Okay, let's go.
With tensions already high, the General's problems could be about to get considerably worse. The International Criminal Court's prosecutor wants Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir arrested and tried for war crimes in Darfur. This would likely mean a backlash against UNAMID.
ICC is a political instrument, and that they are playing with fire, and that this is destabilizing not only Sudan, but the whole region.
Could you guarantee the safety of UNAMID if President Bashir is indeed indicted?
Well, security is not something that can be guaranteed by somebody, and it's the state in the country.
Would you ask UNAMID to leave?
We will look in all options that we have then, and we'll discuss it very thoughtfully, and we'll take the right decisions then, inshallah.
The International Court is working on judicial issues. We belong to two different organizations. We have two different approaches. Yes, any action each of us take may have effect on the other. Thank you very much.
Meanwhile, General Agwai must focus on the immediate threats. And next stop is Tine, on Sudan's western border. These peacekeepers are in a very delicate position here. Just over there is Chad, a country which is being accused of sponsoring many of the rebels.
This is one of the areas that really we have to build up to be able to monitor and maintain a full picture of what happens between the two countries. For a lasting solution to the Darfurian crisis, we must have a final solution to the Chad-Sudan problem.
Chad and Sudan are seen as fighting a proxy war in Darfur. Both governments accuse each other of funding rebels to launch cross-border raids. Those Chadian-backed rebels have already sent a warning to the Sudanese. Earlier this year, the conflict in Darfur came to the capital for the first time, when rebels launched an audacious attack here in Khartoum. Their aim was to seize power. The Sudanese army repelled the rebels. Since then, the army's gone on the offensive, launching a series of attacks on Darfur camps for the internally displaced. The government believes the rebels have infiltrated these camps and are using them to launch counterattacks.
Because these people were very well entrenched in the camps, they mobilized and they started to shoot the police before the police reacted.
But isn't it inevitable that innocent people will be killed?
It's definitely innocent people were killed. Definitely that was very unfortunate, and definitely it is something regrettable, and I think a clean job should be done to take these people out of the camp without, if possible, hurting any civilian. But I ask you, is that the only case in Sudan?
Well, very few wars have had 300,000 people dead and 2.5 million displaced.
It is not 30,000. How that was the number what was said by the British ambassador or whatever in the UN, and he regretted it.
Well, the United Nations says the estimate is 300,000 people dead.
That was not the United Nations. It was somebody in the United Nations who is a British ambassador or envoy or whoever.
What's your estimate? How many people have died in this conflict?
I don't want to say a wide number, really. And I heard estimates of 10,000. I heard something like this, and I don't think the number is very big, actually.
This is a gross understatement. Both the United Nations and African Union say 300,000 have been killed as a result of the conflict, most of them because of malnutrition. The government has extended its offensive beyond the camps and is now attacking rebel strongholds south of El Fasher. We were on hand when one of the most heavily armed guerrilla groups rolled into town. It looked as though tensions could flare as they eyed off government troops. But instead, there were to be no hostilities this afternoon. In a surprise move, the Sudanese government and a faction of the rebel forces are meeting here to try to find some common ground and find a way to end weeks of fighting. Mini Manawi, the leader of a faction of the Sudanese Liberation Army, made a rare public appearance. A key player in peace negotiations, he was one of the rebel leaders to sign the Darfur peace agreement with the government. But he's threatening to abandon the deal after his soldiers were targeted by the Sudanese military. A frantic afternoon of talks ensued, involving Sudan's vice president and even the US ambassador. Mini Manawi may be openly friendly with UNAMID's commander, but behind the general's back, his faction is highly critical of UNAMID's role.
Unfortunately, up to date, UNAMID cannot do anything. They cannot protect themselves. How do you think that to protect the civilians here?
Ismail Hashim, the president of Mini Manawi's political party, believes UNAMID is little more than a government puppet.
They don't have any independent decision for themselves, you know. The government is directing them as they like. Actually, I cannot see any benefit from the UNAMID in this place. I don't think so.
With the formalities completed, it was time to leave. Rebel militiamen and government troops leading a wild ride through El Fasher before storming the airport. Rebel leader Mini Manawi was clearly savouring his role as peacemaker under the terms of the Darfur peace agreement, known by everyone here as the DPA.
What were the result of those talks? Activation of the DPA agreement. Whenever there is any activation, we will come back.
So you're quite happy with the government's stance now? You're happy with what the government are doing?
Yes, we hope to be happy if they are serious.
Do you think that's the end of the conflict as far as you're concerned?
I don't think that this will end, because the ending of the conflict, there is many things. It has to be started. Negotiation and goodness, and also willingness of the progress of the DPA.
Mini Manawi has returned to his people with hope that they may be spared further bloodshed. It's a hope shared by General Agwai.
Are you pleased with the way that developed?
Yes, well, things are positive. It's better to do too much talking than fighting. The more people talk, the more they will come to terms, they will narrow their differences, and the more they will come to an agreement.
When we spoke to Mini Manawi's faction this morning, they were saying they're disappointed that UNAMID hasn't been able to do more. Have they expressed that to you?
It depends on who you talk to and what perception people have. And I love when I hear everybody criticizing us. That means we are neutral.
neutrality may be one objective, but UNAMID's commander knows that his mission will only be successful if peace returns to Darfur.
If you are lucky, you come out as a hero. If you are not lucky, you come out with the whole world blaming you. That is clear. That is absolutely clear. But one thing that nobody will take away from me, nobody will take away this from me, that I am ready to give my best. And if my best brings out peace in Darfur, I will be happy for it. If my best doesn't, I will leave being satisfied that I have rendered my best, but my best was not good enough.